Have you ever had that moment where your entire world shifts in an instant? Where everything you thought was real suddenly reveals itself as nothing but a carefully constructed facade? That's what happened to me 3 months ago. And honestly, I'm still processing it. Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm 33, work as a real estate attorney in Chicago. And up until recently, I thought I had the perfect marriage. Spoiler alert, I didn't. It was a Tuesday evening in autumn. I remember because the leaves had just started changing, and I'd spent my lunch break walking around the park near my office, taking photos of the golden canopy above me. My husband, Daniel, had texted earlier saying he'd be working late, again at his investment firm. This had become our new normal over the past few months. Him staying late, me eating dinner alone, scrolling through my phone while some Netflix show played in the background. I'd made myself a simple pasta dish and was about to settle on the couch when I realized I needed to email a client some paperwork that was saved on our shared drive. My laptop was charging in the bedroom, but Daniel's was right there on the coffee table where he'd left it that morning. We'd always had an open device policy, no passwords between us, nothing to hide. That was what we'd agreed on when we got married 5 years ago. I opened his MacBook, intending to log into my email through the browser. That's when I saw it, a folder on his desktop labeled My Exit Plan. I'll admit, I hesitated. For about 3 seconds. Then curiosity and a sudden knot of dread in my stomach made me double-click. Inside were spreadsheets, documents, and screenshots. One file immediately caught my eye. Apartment Zillow Live, PDF. I clicked it open and felt my entire body go cold. There it was, our apartment, our home. The place we'd scrimped and saved for 2 years to afford the down payment. The place where we'd hosted our first Thanksgiving as a married couple. The place where we'd painted an extra room a soft yellow for a baby that hadn't come yet. And there it was, listed for sale, without my knowledge, without my consent. I checked the timestamp on the file. It had been created 3 weeks ago, but the listing showed as just posted, meaning he'd pulled the trigger today. While I was admiring autumn leaves, my husband was putting our home up for sale. I didn't slam the laptop shut. I didn't throw it across the room. Instead, I felt an eerie calm settle over me as I continued exploring the folder. There were other files: Asset Division, XLSX, Timeline, DocX, New Apartment Options, PDF, All Studios, I noticed, definitely not sized for 2 people, and Post-Divorce, Budget, XLSX. The spreadsheets were the most revealing. Daniel had calculated everything down to the penny. How much he thought he'd get from the apartment sale. How much he'd generously leave me with. How quickly he could move out. He'd even factored in what he called a guilt payment, a lump sum he planned to offer me, to keep things amicable. As if putting a price tag on our marriage, on my heart, would somehow make his betrayal less severe. What struck me most wasn't just the meticulous planning, but the timeline. According to his documents, he'd been working on this for at least 6 months. 6 months of lying next to me at night. 6 months of I love yous. 6 months of discussing future plans that he never intended to be part of. I scrolled further and found emails between him and a realtor, someone I didn't know, not our friend Melissa who had helped us buy the place. In the emails, he claimed he was selling because of a mutual separation and that his wife was fully on board. He'd forged my electronic signature on some preliminary paperwork. That's when attorney me kicked in. What he'd done wasn't just emotionally devastating, it was potentially illegal. In our state, you can't sell marital property without consent from both parties. He knew that. He must have been counting on blindsiding me, hoping I'd be too emotional to think clearly. I checked the time, 7:30 p.m. Daniel wouldn't be home until at least 9 Psy. I had time. First, I took photos of everything with my phone, every document, every email, every spreadsheet. Then I forwarded key emails to my personal account, evidence secured. Then I called Janet, my colleague who specialized in divorce law. Hey, Janet, it's Rebecca. I need your advice, confidentially, and I may need a referral. I explained the situation, keeping my voice steady despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. What a piece of work, Janet said when I'd finished. Do you want me to recommend someone? Or are you asking for my off-the-record advice? Both, I said. Off-record first, don't confront him yet, get your ducks in a row. And Rebecca, I'm so sorry. That brief kindness almost broke me, but I pushed through. Thanks. Now, professionally speaking, he's made a crucial mistake. He's created a paper trail of attempting to sell marital property without consent. That's going to look very bad for him. Forward me those emails, and I'll connect you with Sophia Chen. She'll destroy him. After I hung up, I took a deep breath and did something I never thought I'd do. I went into our bedroom, pulled out the suitcase from under the bed, and packed some essentials. Not to leave, I had no intention of going anywhere, but to be prepared. Then I called my sister, Claire. "Can I stay with you for a few days?" I asked. "Of course," she said immediately. "What's wrong?" "I'll explain when I get there. But Claire, don't tell anyone I'm coming, okay? Especially not Daniel if he calls." I heard the concern in her voice. Rebecca, you're scaring me." "I'm okay," I assured her. "Just need some space to think." After hanging up, I sent an email to my boss requesting emergency personal days, effective immediately. He responded within minutes. "Take whatever time you need. Let me know if I can help." I was closing the laptop when I noticed another folder I hadn't opened yet. Post Rebecca Life. With trembling fingers, I clicked it open. Inside were photos, lots of photos, Daniel with another woman, dinner dates, weekend getaways, cozy moments in what looked like a hotel room. According to the timestamps, the oldest photo was from 8 months ago. 8 months of deception. 8 months of making a fool out of me. The woman was younger, mid-20s maybe. She worked at his firm. I recognized her from the holiday party last year. Alexis or Alyssa, something like that. I remembered how she'd complimented my dress, how I'd thought she seemed sweet. I felt sick, but I still didn't cry. Instead, I copied those photos too. Then I checked the time again, 8:15. Daniel would be home soon. I closed all the folders, cleared the browser history, and put the laptop back exactly where it had been. Then I grabbed my packed bag, left my key on the counter, and walked out the door. As I drove to my sister's place, I finally allowed myself to feel. Anger came first, hot, pulsing waves of it. Then humiliation. Then a deep, aching sadness. But beneath it all was something else. Determination. Daniel thought he had it all figured out. He thought I'd crumble, take whatever pathetic settlement he offered, and slink away while he moved his girlfriend into the home we'd built together. He had no idea who he was dealing with. By the time I reached Claire's apartment, I'd stopped shaking. When she opened the door, her face filled with concern. "Rebecca, what on earth? Daniel's having an affair and trying to sell our apartment behind my back," I said flatly. "I need a place to stay while I plan my next move." She pulled me into a hug, and that's when the tears finally came. I cried for what felt like hours, purging months of lies and betrayal from my system. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes but a clear head. I called Sophia Chen's office and scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. Then I blocked Daniel's number after seeing he'd called 17 times and left 8 voicemails. Let him panic. Let him wonder. At 2 p.m., I sat across from Sophia Chen in her sleek downtown office. "Janet briefed me," she said without preamble. "I've seen some underhanded moves in my 15 years practicing divorce law, but your husband's plan is particularly calculated." I nodded, pushing the folder of printed evidence across her desk. "I want to be equally calculated in my response." "What exactly are you hoping for?" she asked, leafing through the documents. "I want the apartment," I said simply. And it's the one thing he clearly wants to liquidate quickly for his new life. It's the one thing I'm not willing to give up. Sophia looked up, a glimmer of respect in her eyes. "Most clients come in wanting everything or wanting revenge. I appreciate your focus." "I'm not saying I don't want my fair share of everything else," I clarified. "But the apartment is non-negotiable." She nodded. "His attempt to sell without your consent gives us leverage. But we can do better." She tapped her pen against the desk, thinking, what if we let him believe his plan is working? I leaned forward. "I'm listening. You go home. Act normal, or as normal as possible given the circumstances. Don't mention the affair or the sale listing. Meanwhile, we file for divorce on the grounds of adultery, but we keep it sealed temporarily. We also add a specific clause to the divorce agreement." "What kind of clause?" Sophia smiled, and I could see why Janet had recommended her. "It has a clause stating that in lieu of alimony and in consideration of the emotional distress caused, you retain full ownership of the apartment while he keeps his retirement accounts untouched." Will he go for that? He will when he realizes the alternative is a very public divorce where his deception is laid bare, potentially affecting his professional reputation. Men like your husband in the financial sector, They care about their public image almost as much as they care about money. I considered this. So, I'm supposed to go home and pretend everything is fine while he's still seeing her? Just long enough for us to get everything in place. Think of it as an investment in your future peace of mind. I wasn't sure I could do it, but I understood the strategy. How long? 2 weeks, max. In the meantime, collect any additional evidence you can without being obvious. Financial statements, text messages, anything that strengthens our position. As I left Sophia's office, I felt something I hadn't felt since opening that laptop. Power. Daniel thought he was the one with the escape plan. He had no idea I was crafting my own. When I finally returned home that evening, Daniel was pacing the living room. He rushed to me, relief washing over his face. "Rebecca, where have you been? I've been worried sick. You weren't answering your phone. You didn't leave a note?" I cut him off with a raised hand. I needed some space. Claire's having a rough time with her breakup, so I stayed with her. The lie came easily, which surprised me. "You could have told me," he said, attempting to pull me into a hug. I allowed it briefly before stepping back. "Sorry, it was impulsive." He studied my face. "Is everything okay between us?" I forced a small smile. "Just tired. Work is intense right now." He seemed to accept this, visibly relaxing. "I was thinking we could go away this weekend. There's a nice bed and breakfast in Michigan I've been wanting to check out." Of course, he needed me out of the apartment for showings. "I can't this weekend," I said. "Too much work to catch up on." A flicker of frustration crossed his face before he masked it. "Maybe next weekend then." "Maybe," I echoed. That night, as we lay in bed with what felt like a canyon between us, I stared at the ceiling and thought about the life we'd planned here. The children we'd talked about having. The holidays we'd envisioned hosting. All of it built on quicksand. As Daniel's breathing slowed into sleep beside me, I made a silent promise to myself. He'd walk out with his precious exit plan, but I'd be staying right here, with the deed to our home in my name alone. The game was on, and he had no idea he'd already lost. Morning routines are strange things. Even when your entire world has been upended, your body still goes through the motions: coffee, shower, makeup, clothes. The next morning, I found myself mechanically preparing for work while Daniel bustled around the kitchen, making his protein shake as if everything was normal. "I'll probably be late again tonight," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Big client presentation tomorrow." "No problem," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I've got a dinner with some colleagues anyway." This was a lie. I'd be meeting with Sophia again. But the ease with which the falsehood slipped out startled me. Had we both become such accomplished liars? Or had he simply taught me a new skill? "Great," he said, obvious relief in his tone. He'd be with her tonight. "Don't wait up." As I watched him leave, briefcase in hand, I wondered if he was thinking about the last time he'd walk out this door. If he'd memorized the way the morning light hit the hardwood floors we'd so carefully selected. If he felt even a twinge of regret. I doubted it. Once he was gone, I began my own work. First, I took photos of every room in the apartment, documenting the current condition. Then I went through our filing cabinet, copying important financial documents, tax returns, investment statements, property records. I found our safe deposit box key and made a mental note to visit the bank during lunch. Before leaving, I checked Zillow. Sure enough, there was our apartment, described as a stunning downtown condo with panoramic city views, newly renovated kitchen, and spacious primary suite. The asking price was $50,000 above what we'd likely get. Ambitious, even in this market. The photos were professionally done, taken recently when I'd been at a conference in Denver. He'd planned it perfectly. 12 people had already saved the listing. There was an open house scheduled for Saturday. I texted Claire, "Need a favor? Can you go to an open house for me on Saturday? I'll send details." At work, I moved through my day in a fog. Thankfully, my paralegal, Marcus A., handled most client interactions while I focused on research for a complex case, or pretended to. In reality, I was documenting everything I could remember about our finances, creating a detailed timeline of our relationship, and making notes for Sophia. During lunch, I visited our bank and spent 30 minutes in the safe deposit room, photographing every document: our marriage certificate, property deeds, insurance policies, and the paperwork for Daniel's inherited vacation property in Maine, something he hadn't mentioned in any of his exit plan documents. Interesting oversight. That evening, While Daniel was with his mistress under the guise of work, I met Sophia at her office. "I've drafted the divorce petition," she said, sliding a document across her desk. "We're citing irreconcilable differences publicly, but noting the adultery in sealed supplementary filings. This gives us leverage without immediately damaging his reputation." I reviewed the document, impressed by its thoroughness. "And the clause about the apartment?" "Page 7, she said. "In consideration of the circumstances leading to marital dissolution, husband agrees to transfer all interest in the marital residence to wife Dare, who shall assume sole responsibility for associated mortgage and maintenance costs." "What about his other hidden assets?" I asked, showing her my notes about the main property. Sophia's eyebrows rose. "He forgotten to include a vacation property in his asset division. How convenient." She made a note. "We'll add language ensuring full disclosure of all assets. If he conceals anything, the penalty clauses will be severe." "When do we file?" "We'll have everything ready by next Wednesday. In the meantime, I need you to do something difficult," Sophia said, her expression serious. "I need you to get him to admit to the affair in writing, text or email." I frowned. "How am I supposed to do that without letting on that I know?" "You're a smart woman, Rebecca. Find a natural way to create doubt or jealousy. Men often reveal more when they're defensive." I considered this. "I'll try. One more thing," Sophia added. "Start using cash for personal purchases. And if you have a separate credit card he doesn't know about, use that. We don't want him tracking your movements." On my way home, I stopped at an electronics store and bought a prepaid phone. My burner, as Claire dramatically called it when I told her later. I also withdrew $500 in cash from an ATM not connected to our regular bank. That night, Daniel came home after 11 p.m., smelling of unfamiliar perfume and expensive restaurant food. He showered immediately, obviously hoping to wash away the evidence. When he slipped into bed beside me, I pretended to be asleep. The next few days were an exercise in restraint. I watched Daniel take calls in another room, saw him smiling at his phone, noticed how he always positioned his laptop screen away from me. Every instinct screamed at me to confront him, to throw his deception in his face, but Sophia's strategy required patience. On Friday, Daniel announced he had to go into the office on Saturday for a special project. "The whole day?" I asked, knowing full well he needed to be away during the open house. "Unfortunately, yes," he sighed, playing the part of the dedicated professional. "Should be done by dinner, though. Maybe we can try that new Italian place?" "Sure," I agreed, wondering if he'd even remember this conversation later. Saturday morning, he left early, kissing my cheek perfunctorily on his way out. An hour later, Claire texted me that she was heading to our open house. "What should I look for?" she asked. "Just observe. Who comes? What they say? If the realtor mentions the owners?" At noon, Claire called me. "You would not believe the things this realtor is saying," she fumed. "She told everyone the owners are divorcing and the husband is motivated to sell quickly for a fresh start. She's basically inviting lowball offers." My blood boiled, but I forced myself to remain calm. "And did she mention me specifically?" "No, just that the wife walk isn't in the picture anymore. There are about 15 people here, by the way. Some seem really interested." "Thanks for doing this," I said. "Take some discreet photos if you can." "Already did." "And Rebecca." I may have mentioned to a few people that I heard the owners are actually not divorcing and the listing might be fraudulent. I couldn't help but smile. "Claire." "What?" "Just creating some reasonable doubt. No serious buyer wants legal complications." That evening, Daniel came home looking tense. When his phone buzzed with a text, he immediately stepped onto our balcony to take the call. Through the glass door, I could see him gesturing animatedly, running his hand through his hair in frustration. The realtor, no doubt, telling him about the crazy lady spreading rumors at his open house. When he came back in, I was calmly reading on the couch. "Everything okay?" I asked innocently. "Just work stuff," he muttered. "Listen, I don't really feel like going out tonight after all. Mind if we order in?" "That's fine," I said, turning a page in my book. "I'm not that hungry anyway." Over the next few days, I implemented Sophia's plan to get written evidence of the affair. It was easier than I expected. On Monday evening, I casually mentioned that I'd run into his colleague Michael, who had seemed surprised Daniel had worked late the previous Thursday. "Michael must be confused," Daniel said quickly. "I definitely was at the office." "That's odd," I said, furrowing my brow. "He specifically mentioned the executive team dinner that night that you apparently missed." Daniel's face flushed. I was working in a different department, consulting on their project. I let it drop, but later sent a text. Hey, still feeling weird about the Michael thing. Where were you really on Thursday? The response took nearly an hour. Client meeting ran late, didn't make it to the team dinner, should have been clearer, sorry. I forwarded the exchange to Sophia with the note. There was no team dinner, building the lie. Tuesday evening, I stepped up my game. I left my laptop open on the kitchen counter while making dinner, a fake email draft visible on the screen. 2. Claire subject. Should I be worried? Found a receipt for dinner at Le Bernardin in his jacket. 300 plus for 2 people last Thursday when he said he was working late. Not sure what to think anymore. When Daniel walked in, I quickly closed the laptop as if embarrassed, then excused myself to the bathroom. When I returned, I could tell by his expression that he'd read it. That night, he was especially attentive, suggesting we watch my favorite show, offering to give me a back rub. I accepted the show but declined the massage, claiming a headache. Just before bed, my plan worked. A text arrived. I should have been honest. I did have dinner with Alyssa from work Thursday. Purely professional. She's having trouble with a client and needed advice. Nothing to worry about. Alyssa. So that was her name. I responded only, thanks for telling me. In the morning, I awoke to find Daniel had already left for work, but he'd sent another text. I hate that you found out that way. Alyssa is just a colleague. I value our marriage and would never do anything to jeopardize it. The irony was almost too much. I forwarded both messages to Sophia, who responded immediately. Perfect. We now have written admission of a connection, plus a demonstrable lie about the nature of the relationship. The photos you have prove it's more than professional. By Wednesday, we were ready to file the divorce petition. Sophia had added language requiring full financial disclosure, including the main property, and strengthened the clause about the apartment. She had also prepared a restraining order preventing Daniel from selling any marital assets during the proceedings. Once we file, the clock starts ticking, she warned. He'll be served within 48 hours. Be prepared for the confrontation. I'm ready, I assured her, though my churning stomach suggested otherwise. That evening, Daniel announced he had to go on a business trip the next day. Last-minute thing, he explained, not meeting my eyes. Dallas client needs hand-holding. I'll be back Saturday. Perfect timing. He'd be away when the papers were served. Safe travels, I said mildly. Thursday morning, I watched him leave with his overnight bag, wondering if he was actually going to Dallas or meeting Alyssa somewhere. It didn't matter anymore. I called Sophia. He's gone. Let's do this. By afternoon, our divorce petition was officially filed with the court. The restraining order on assets was granted immediately, and a copy was sent to our realtor, effectively killing the listing. The sheriff would serve Daniel personally when he returned on Saturday. With everything in motion, I finally allowed myself a moment to feel. Sitting alone in our apartment, soon to be my apartment, I looked at our wedding photo still displayed on the bookshelf. We looked so happy, so hopeful. Had it all been a lie? Or had something changed along the way? I took the photo down and placed it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd want to look at it again, but not today. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Just landed in Dallas, miss you. I didn't respond. Instead, I called my boss and explained that I was going through a personal situation and would need to work remotely for a while. He was understanding, as I knew he would be. Take care of yourself, Rebecca, he said. Your job will be here when you're ready to come back full-time. Next, I called Claire. It's done, I told her. The papers are filed. How do you feel? She asked. Hollow, I admitted. But also, relieved, like I can finally stop pretending. Come stay with me until he's served, she suggested. We'll have a sister weekend, wine, bad movies, ice cream, the works. The idea was tempting, but I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. No, I need to be here. This is my home. I'm not running away. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The weight of deception, both his and mine, was lifting. Friday passed quietly as I worked from home, fielding concerned texts from Daniel who seemed to sense something was off by my brief responses. Sophia called to confirm that the sheriff would arrive at our apartment around noon on Saturday. When Daniel was scheduled to return, be somewhere else, she advised. Let him process the papers alone. Call me after he contacts you. I agreed, though part of me wanted to see his face when he realized his carefully constructed plan had backfired spectacularly. Saturday morning, I packed an overnight bag and left a single item on the kitchen counter. A printed screenshot of our apartment's Zillow listing, with a note that simply read, "I know everything. Don't call me, call my lawyer." I included Sophia's business card. Then I drove to a hotel downtown, not to hide, but to give myself space for whatever came next. I checked in, ordered room service, and waited. At 12:37 p.m., my phone exploded with notifications. 10 missed calls from Daniel in 5 minutes, voicemails, texts ranging from confused to angry to pleading. "What is this? Call me right now. You're making a huge mistake. We can talk about this. Rebecca, please." I didn't respond to any of them. At 1:15, Sophia called. "He's contacted me," she said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. "He's not happy." "What did he say?" "Initially, he denied everything and demanded to know how we found out about the listing. When I mentioned we had evidence of both the affair and his attempt to sell marital property without consent, he changed tactics. Now he's claiming it was all a misunderstanding and he wants to meet with you to explain. And the main property? Claimed it wasn't relevant because it was inherited. I reminded him that assets acquired during marriage, inherited or not, are subject to disclosure in divorce proceedings in our state. That shut him up pretty quickly. I took a deep breath. What happens now? Ball's in his court. He has 20 days to respond to the petition. Given the evidence we have, I expect his lawyer, once he gets one, will advise him to negotiate rather than fight. The clause about the apartment is our primary goal, but we should be prepared for him to contest it. And if he does, then we unseal the adultery allegations and submit everything we have. His carefully cultivated professional image takes a hit. Most men in his position will avoid that at all costs. After hanging up, I turned off my phone and ordered a glass of wine from room service. As I sat by the hotel window, looking out at the city skyline, I wondered where Daniel was at that moment. Was he still in our apartment, pacing and fuming? Had he called Alyssa for comfort? Was he already meeting with lawyers? For the first time since this all began, I found I didn't really care. That evening, I turned my phone back on to find fewer messages. Daniel seemed to have accepted that I wasn't going to respond. There was, however, an email with the subject line, "Please read, I can explain everything." Against my better judgment, I opened it. "Rebecca, I know how this looks, but you've misunderstood. The listing was just exploratory. I was checking our equity position in case we wanted to upgrade to a larger place for when we start a family. I should have discussed it with you first, and I'm sorry for that. As for Alyssa, she's just a colleague going through a tough time. I've been mentoring her, nothing more. The photos you have must be misleading. I love you. We can work this out. Please come home so we can talk." Daniel. I stared at the screen, almost impressed by his audacity. Even now, faced with incontrovertible evidence, he was still lying, still trying to manipulate me. I forwarded the email to Sophia with the note. More evidence of deception. He's still lying. Her response was quick. Standard playbook, first denial, then minimization, then blame shifting. Next will come anger when he realizes you're not falling for it. Don't engage directly. Everything through me from now on. I followed her advice and didn't respond to Daniel. Instead, I ordered dinner, took a long bath, and watched mindless television until I fell asleep. Sunday morning, I checked out of the hotel and drove to Claire's apartment. I wasn't ready to go home yet, not while Daniel might still be there. "So, what's the plan?" Claire asked as she poured me coffee. "Are you going back to the apartment?" "Not until I know he's gone," I said. "Sophia thinks he'll move out soon once he realizes I'm serious about the divorce. And if he doesn't? I hadn't considered that possibility. Then I guess we'll have to figure out a temporary arrangement until the court decides." Claire squeezed my hand. "You can stay here as long as you need, though my couch isn't exactly comfortable for long term." I smiled gratefully. "Thanks, but I'm not letting him drive me out of my own home." Later that day, Sophia called with an update. "Daniel's hired Patricia Harmon," she said. "She's good, aggressive but pragmatic. Is that bad for us?" "Actually, it might be good. Harmon won't let him waste time with emotional tactics. She'll assess the evidence, calculate his exposure, and advise accordingly. I've worked with her before. She's tough but fair." "Have they responded to our proposal about the apartment?" "Not formally, but Harmon called to feel out our position. I made it clear the apartment is non-negotiable. She didn't immediately reject it, which suggests they're considering it. Monday morning, I returned to my office ignoring the curious glances from colleagues who had undoubtedly noticed my absence. Marcus, bless him, had rearranged my schedule to give me a light day. Around noon, my work phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Rebecca Henderson. I answered professionally. Rebecca, it's Daniel. His voice was tightly controlled. We need to talk. I felt my heart race but kept my voice steady. Any communication should go through our attorneys, Daniel. This is ridiculous, he snapped. You're acting like I'm some kind of monster. I made a mistake, yes, but you're blowing this completely out of proportion. A mistake? I couldn't help but respond. You listed our home for sale without telling me. Daniel, you had an entire folder called My Exit Plan. You've been having an affair for months. Those aren't mistakes. They're calculated decisions. I was confused, he said, his voice softening into the placating tone he used with difficult clients. I wasn't thinking clearly, but I've realized what's important now. I choose you, Rebecca. I choose our marriage. Something inside me hardened. That's no longer your choice to make. So that's it. 5 years of marriage and you're just walking away? No, Daniel. You walked away the moment you created that exit plan. I'm just making it official. I could hear his breathing change, the calm facade cracking. You think you're so clever, don't you? You think you've won. This isn't over. You're right about one thing, I said. It isn't over, but it will be soon. Goodbye, Daniel. I hung up and immediately called Sophia to report the conversation. She was not pleased. He shouldn't be contacting you directly, she said. I'll have a word with Harmon about it. In the meantime, document every interaction, time, date, what was said. He seemed angry, I noted. Threatened. Good, Sophia said simply. When men like Daniel feel threatened, they make mistakes, and mistakes strengthen our position. That evening, Claire accompanied me back to the apartment. Daniel's car wasn't in its usual space, but we were cautious anyway, having Claire check the apartment before I entered. All clear, she called, but he's definitely been here. There are some empty spaces where his things were. I walked through each room, noting what was missing. His favorite books, his golf trophies, the expensive watch collection he kept in the bedroom safe. He'd left most of the furniture and art, things we'd chosen together. In the kitchen, I found a note propped against the coffee maker. This isn't how our story ends. I'll be at the Marriott downtown if you want to talk. D. I crumpled the note and threw it away. Claire stayed with me that night, both for moral support and as a precaution in case Daniel decided to return. We ordered pizza, opened a bottle of wine, and for a few hours, I almost forgot the upheaval my life was experiencing. The next morning, I received an email from Sophia. Harmon has requested a meeting. Thursday, 2 p.m. at our office. A good sign. They want to negotiate rather than proceed to court. This was progress. 3 days until the meeting that could potentially resolve everything, or at least the apartment issue. I could handle 3 more days of uncertainty. What I couldn't have predicted was what happened next. Tuesday afternoon, I was deep in research for a client case when Marcus knocked on my office door. Rebecca, there's someone here to see you. Says her name is Alyssa Rivera. The floor seemed to drop beneath me. Alyssa, here, at my office. Did she say what she wants? I asked, proud of how steady my voice sounded. Marcus shook his head. Just that it's personal and important. I considered having him turn her away, but curiosity won out. Send her in, please. And Marcus, stay close. Moments later, she walked in, younger than I remembered from the holiday party, stylishly dressed in a cream blouse and tailored pants. Pretty in that effortless way that had probably made things easy for her all her life. Mrs. Henderson, she began, extending her hand. Thank you for seeing me. I didn't take her hand. It's Ms. Henderson professionally. What can I do for you, Mrs. Rivera? She withdrew her hand awkwardly and sat down without being invited. I think we need to talk about Daniel. I disagree, I replied coolly. Any matters concerning my husband should be directed to my attorney. Please, she said, leaning forward. I know what you must think of me, but there's more to the story than you know. I arched an eyebrow. Such as? Daniel isn't who you think he is, she said, lowering her voice. He's been lying to both of us. Despite myself, I was intrigued. Go on. He told me you two were already separated, she said, that you'd agreed to divorce months ago, but were keeping it quiet until the apartment sold. I maintained my neutral expression, though internally I was adding this to Daniel's list of deceptions. He said you were the one who wanted out, she continued, that you'd fallen out of love with him and were seeing someone else. I almost laughed at the absurdity. And you believed him without question. She had the grace to look embarrassed. He showed me texts, supposedly from you, saying you needed space, talking about your new friend. I see now they were probably fake. Why tell me this now? I asked. Why come to my workplace? Alyssa fidgeted with her purse. Because yesterday he asked me to lie for him, to say our relationship was purely professional if anyone asked. He's trying to protect his assets, he said. Especially some property in Maine that you apparently don't know about. That caught my attention. The cabin? She looked surprised. No, not a cabin. It's oceanfront property, very valuable. He said it was his insurance policy if things went badly with the divorce. This was new information. Daniel had inherited a small cabin from his grandfather that I knew about. But oceanfront property? That was something else entirely. Do you have any proof of this property? I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. He showed me some tax documents once. I took a photo. She pulled out her phone and handed it to me. There was a property tax statement for oceanfront land in Kennebunkport, Maine, valued at just over $2.1 million. In Daniel's name only, purchased 18 months ago, well into our marriage. I took a screenshot and emailed it to myself before handing back her phone. Just so you know, Alyssa added, he has money hidden. Offshore accounts, I think. He mentioned something about funds that Rebecca can't touch when he was drunk once. After she left, I immediately called Sophia and relayed everything. This changes our approach, Sophia said, excitement in her voice. Hidden assets during divorce proceedings? That's a serious offense. Can we prove it? We can request a forensic accountant as part of discovery. If he's hidden assets, they'll find them. And if this property isn't disclosed in his financial affidavit, we've got him dead to rights. Thursday arrived with a knot in my stomach. I dressed carefully in a navy suit and headed to Sophia's office for our pre-meeting strategy session. At 2 p.m. sharp, Sophia's assistant showed Daniel and his attorney, Patricia Harmon, into the conference room. Daniel was wearing his power suit. When our eyes met, he gave me a small, conciliatory smile that I didn't return. Patricia Harmon was exactly as I'd imagined. Sleek, polished, and radiating efficiency. Let's try to make this productive, shall we? Sophia matched her professional tone. Indeed, the primary non-negotiable item is sole ownership of the marital residence for my client. Harmon's expression didn't change. That's a significant asset to request outright. What are you offering in exchange? Mrs. Henderson is willing to waive any claim to Mr. Henderson's retirement accounts and investment portfolio, provided all assets have been properly disclosed, Sophia said, emphasizing those last words. Daniel shifted in his chair but said nothing. Additionally, Sophia continued, she will not seek alimony, despite being entitled to it given the circumstances of the separation. Harmon made a note. And what circumstances would those be specifically? Sophia smiled thinly. I think we all know the answer to that, counselor. But if you require clarification, we have extensive documentation of Mr. Henderson's extramarital activities and his attempt to sell marital property without consent. Daniel finally spoke, his voice tight. This is ridiculous. Rebecca, you're blowing everything out of proportion. Yes, I made a mistake with the listing, I admit that. But it was just exploratory. And Alyssa was... Mr. Henderson, Sophia interrupted sharply. Please address your comments to me, not my client. Harmon placed a restraining hand on Daniel's arm. Let's stay focused on the assets. My client has prepared a financial disclosure statement as required. She slid a document across the table. I scanned the pages, noting what was included and what wasn't. No mention of the Kennebunkport property, no offshore accounts. I met Daniel's eyes and saw a flash of uncertainty cross his face. He knew I knew. This appears incomplete, Sophia said mildly. Perhaps there was an oversight. The disclosure is complete to the best of my client's knowledge, Harmon replied smoothly. Really? Sophia raised an eyebrow. No property in Kennebunkport, Maine. No accounts outside the listed financial institutions. Daniel paled visibly, while Harmon looked genuinely surprised. She clearly hadn't been informed. May we have a moment? Harmon asked, already standing up. They stepped outside, leaving Daniel and me alone in the conference room. Finally, he spoke. She came to see you, didn't she, Alyssa? I didn't answer. You can't believe everything she says, he continued. She's unstable, Rebecca. Vindictive because I ended things. Did you? I asked, my first words to him directly. End things. He hesitated just a fraction too long. Of course. When all this blew up, I realized what was important. Us. Our marriage. There is no us anymore, Daniel, I said quietly. There's just the division of assets and moving on with our lives. You don't mean that, he insisted. 5 years together counts for something. It counted for nothing when you created your exit plan, I replied. When you listed our home without telling me? When you hid property acquisitions and created offshore accounts? His face hardened. You can't prove any of that, I smiled. Watch me. The door opened, and Harmon returned alone, her expression grim. Mr. Henderson is taking a moment to collect himself, she explained. In the meantime, perhaps we can discuss revised terms. Over the next hour, a new agreement took shape. Daniel would transfer his interest in our apartment to me. I would waive claims to his retirement accounts. All hidden assets, including the Kennebunkport property, would be disclosed and divided equally. A non-disparagement clause would prevent either of us from publicly discussing the reasons for our divorce. By the time Daniel rejoined us, looking defeated, the framework was established. I'll need to review this with my client privately, Harmon said, gathering her papers. We'll respond formally by tomorrow. As they prepared to leave, Daniel paused at the door. Rebecca, he said softly, I really am sorry for everything. For the first time since this began, I believed he meant it, not that it changed anything. Goodbye, Daniel, I said, turning away. Once they were gone, Sophia squeezed my shoulder. You did well, very well. I think we've got this. Back at the apartment that evening, I poured a glass of wine and walked through each room, seeing it with new eyes, not as the home Daniel and I had built together, but as my home, mine alone. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It's Alyssa. Just wanted you to know Daniel's been calling me non-stop. Thought you should be aware he's still lying to both of us. I saved the number but didn't respond. Daniel's continued deceptions were no longer my concern. As I prepared for bed, I removed my wedding ring, something I'd continued wearing out of habit, and placed it in my jewelry box. One more tie to Daniel, severed. Tomorrow would bring more negotiations, more paperwork, more steps toward officially ending my marriage. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, I felt something like peace. Daniel had made his exit plan, but in the end, I was the one who would truly be free. 1 month later, I stood in my apartment, looking at the freshly painted walls of my new home office. What had once been a nursery in waiting was now a space entirely my own. A sleek desk facing the window, bookshelves filled with legal texts, and not a trace of the soft yellow paint that had represented a future that would never happen. The divorce was finalized with remarkable speed. Daniel, faced with the evidence of his financial deception and the threat of a public scandal, had agreed to all our terms. The apartment was mine. The hidden oceanfront property in Maine was sold, with proceeds split equally. His offshore accounts, which turned out to be even more substantial than I'd imagined, were divided according to the agreement Sophia had crafted. I hadn't seen Daniel since that day in Sophia's office. All communication had been through our attorneys. According to Claire, who still had mutual friends with him, he'd moved to Boston for a fresh start. With Alyssa, without her. I didn't know. And more surprisingly, I didn't care. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Still on for dinner tonight. Reservations at 7. I smiled and replied, wouldn't miss it. Got some news to share. The news was twofold. I'd been offered a partnership at my firm, the youngest female partner in its history, and I'd decided to accept. The other news was more personal. After weeks of sessions with my therapist, I finally felt ready to talk about what had happened, to process it fully rather than just survive it. As I applied my makeup for dinner, I caught my reflection in the mirror and paused. There was something different about my face, not just the absence of dark circles under my eyes or the healthy glow that had returned to my skin. It was my expression, confident, unguarded, present. For months before discovering Daniel's betrayal, I'd worn a mask of contentment over a growing sense that something was wrong. Now, there was no mask, just me, rebuilding my life on my own terms. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Unknown number. Hello? I answered cautiously. Rebecca, it's Alyssa. I almost hung up, but curiosity won out. What do you want? Just to let you know, Daniel's been telling people you were the one who cheated. That you took him for everything he was worth. Her voice was tight, angry. I thought you should know what he's saying. I found myself laughing, genuinely laughing. Thanks for the heads up. But honestly, I don't care what Daniel says anymore. You're not upset? She sounded surprised. People who know me know the truth. People who believe him without question aren't worth my energy. After a pause, she asked, "How do you do that? Just let it go." "Practice," I said simply, "and perspective. A year from now, will Daniel's lies matter to my daily life? No. So why give them power today?" After we hung up, I finished getting ready, feeling lighter somehow. My response to Alyssa hadn't been for her benefit. It had been the truth. Daniel's narrative no longer had the power to hurt me. At dinner, Claire raised her glass in a toast. To new beginnings. I clinked my glass against hers. And to unexpected endings that make them possible. "So," she said, leaning forward. "Partnership, huh? Tell me everything." As I shared the details of the offer, I realized how far I'd come from that Tuesday evening when I'd opened Daniel's laptop. The hurt hadn't disappeared completely, I wasn't sure it ever would, but it had transformed into something else. Wisdom, resilience, and a fierce commitment to my own well-being. Later that night, I returned home and opened the balcony doors, letting in the cool evening air. The city lights sparkled below, a constellation of other lives unfolding in apartments just like mine. How many were starting over? How many were discovering truths they'd rather not know? How many were finding strength they never knew they had? My phone buzzed with an email notification. From Daniel. Subject: "One last thing. Rebecca, I know we're technically not supposed to be in direct contact, but there's something I need to say that can't go through lawyers. I'm sorry. Not just for the affair or the apartment listing, but for everything that came before. The distance, the criticism, the slow erosion of what we had. You deserved better than what I became. The truth is, I was scared. Scared of the future we'd planned. Scared of failing as a husband and potential father. Scared of being trapped in a life I wasn't sure I wanted anymore. But instead of talking to you, I created an escape route. That was cowardly, and I'll always regret it. You were right to take the apartment. It was always more your home than mine. I just wanted you to know that despite everything, those 5 years weren't a lie. At least, not in the beginning. I wish you happiness, Rebecca. I mean that sincerely." Daniel, I read it twice, waiting for the familiar surge of anger or hurt. It didn't come. Instead, there was a curious sense of closure, like the final page of a book being turned. I didn't respond. Some endings don't need an epilogue. Instead, I went to my new office, opened my laptop, and began working on a pro bono case I'd taken on, helping women navigate the legal system during divorce. It felt right, using my experience to make someone else's journey a little easier. As midnight approached, I walked through my apartment one last time before bed, a nightly ritual I'd developed. My home, my sanctuary, my victory. Daniel had crafted his exit plan with surgical precision, never imagining that his escape route would become my path to freedom. He'd walked out with his plan, but I'd stayed with the deed, to the apartment and to my future. And that future, as I was discovering day by day, was looking brighter than I ever could have imagined.